and welcome to Infrastructure Matters, the podcast dedicated to exploring the dynamic world of infrastructure, asset management, and public works. I'm your host, David Jenkins, CE of IPWA. In today's episode, we're joined by Peter Archterstraat, Productivity and Equality Commissioner for New South Wales, for an insightful conversation on productivity planning and building capacity across the infrastructure sector. Peter unpacks the importance of long-term thinking, smarter regulation, and innovative pathways to fill critical workforce gaps. We'll explore everything from micro-credentials to mobility trends, AI adoption to housing strategy, and why collaboration across government, industry, and education is essential for progress. So grab a coffee and let's dive into this important discussion. Well, I'm delighted to have Peter Archterstraat, AM, and the Productivity and Equality Commissioner with me today on Infrastructure Matters. I've known Peter for a number of years, way back in when I used to work at CPA Australia. So, Peter, I'm really delighted to have you here today. And I'm going to start straight off. Simple question, I think. But maybe it's not. How would you describe, what is productivity? You're the Productivity and Equality Commissioner. What is productivity?
Well, look, thanks, David, and thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. Productivity is essentially the amount of goods and services produced in an economy.
Yep.
And if there's more goods and services produced one year than the year before, then on average, people can be better off.
Yep.
And we've been fortunate that from 1900 to about 2012, productivity increased basically every year, roughly about 2 to 3%.
Yep.
Some years went down a little bit, others was higher. But on average, productivity went up 3% or so. And that meant from 1900 to 2012, each person, if you averaged it out, could be 3% better off in real terms.
Yeah.
But then from 2012 to 2016, productivity tapered down to about 1%. So the amount of goods and services only increasing 1%.
Yeah.
But then in 2018, just before the COVID, the level of productivity fell. So there were less goods and services produced in New South Wales per person than the year before.
Yeah.
And that means there's downward pressure on real wages and there's all sorts of issues. Then, of course, after that, during COVID, productivity rose in the short term and then it fell again, and it's actually been negative for the last 2 years, approximately 4% reduction.
And how does that compare with other parts of the world? Are we on a similar trajectory? Or even if we think nationally, are we on a similar trajectory in New South Wales compared to
nationally, fairly similar,
yeah.
And to a certain extent similar with other countries, although some countries are able to produce more per person than we are,
yeah.
And there's lessons there. The average worker in some parts of the OECD can produce in 4 days what it takes the Australian worker 5 days to produce. And there's various reasons for that. But just coming back to the importance of productivity, if we look at just in layperson's terms, and this shows the benefit and how we've stagnated. In the year 1900, it took the average worker 30 minutes of work to earn enough money to purchase a litre of milk.
Yeah.
In 2012, it took that average worker not 30 minutes, but 2 minutes and 12 seconds. They had to work to earn that. But now, 2023, it's taking that worker 2 minutes and 42 seconds.
Yeah.
So what it means is the average worker has to work longer to be able to earn as much money to buy goods that they were able to buy some years ago.
Yeah.
And that's why it's imperative that we increase productivity so that people can consume and purchase the goods today or even more every year.
Okay, and if we go simple terms, and I'm a simple person here, so wouldn't you say that increases in technology and innovation, well, surely we're more productive. Why haven't we we've got more access to technologies than we've ever had. So why aren't we more productive?
Absolutely. Well, you talk to some of your engineering colleagues and things like that, and they will say to you, in 1995, when I was building a house or building working on a project, I didn't have the benefit of mobile phones. If I ran out of something, I'd have to go down to the hardware shop.
Yeah.
That was 1995. And now today in 2025, 30 years later, I've got all this new technology, but it's taking me 40% more time to build a house. Now, why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons for that. And they go down to regulation, they go down to skills. Technology is important, but it also has to be diffused and used well. Australia is not very quick in adopting new technology in business.
Yeah.
Consumers adopt new technology very, very quickly. In fact, Australia is the fourth or fifth quickest adopter of consumer technology, like new iPhones and things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as business technology is concerned, we're about the 50th fastest to adopt new technology in business. And from an AI point of view, Australians are in the bottom 15% quartile of the OECD to adopt AI. So there's a lot we can do in those areas.
Now, I do want to come back to housing, as you mentioned housing just then and use that as an example, but what is it? I mean, what specifically, well, maybe you can tell the audience, what specifically does the Productivity and Equality Commissioner do on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, well, we look at areas where we can improve productivity, which doesn't necessarily fall within the ambit of one particular department.
Yeah, okay.
And we also look to try to find ways where we can modify some of the regulations to make business more able to do their work better.
Yeah.
For example, during the COVID, we were able to streamline lots of regulations during COVID. We were able to, with others, have it so that strata meetings could be done online rather than we're able to do it so that statute declarations could be done online. We were able to do it so that a building could occur on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And so we're able to work with other departments to get reduced regulations.
Now that sort of leads me into the next question: levers. So, what levers do you have to pull? You just said, well, we can look at ways to reduce regulation and burden, but what other levers do you have?
There are a lot of levers that the whole of society has for improving productivity. We have addressing health, we have addressing mental health, we have planning, we have competition, we have better skilling, we have better state-federal relationships, we have IR, we have taxation, we have trade, lots and lots of levers that can be pulled by both business, by consumers, and by state, federal and local governments. The ones that the New South Wales Productivity Commission have been looking at are more the smaller type, David. So the Federal Productivity Commission looks at the big issues like floating the dollar or trade reform or that sort of thing. Yeah. We look at smaller things such as planning, such as housing, such as how do we able to get more people into the teaching profession, how do we get more trades. And our view is that these smaller ones in aggregate could be quite effective because you don't have to be a cricket fan to remember that Sir Donald Bradman, while he got thousands and thousands of runs in his career, the number of sixes that he hit, you could count on two hands. Right? So you don't need to hit a six every time. Lots of ones and twos will get you there. And that's what we've been doing.
I like the analogy. And are you all coordinated? Because you said the Federal Commission, they work on the big ticket items. I'm assuming each state has its own productivity commission. And do you work together in a sort of a coordinated way, fashion?
Queensland has its own productivity commission, as does South Australia. Yeah. The other states have varieties of it, nuances. We work very closely with the Federal Productivity Commission, sharing information, etc., on numerous issues.
Yeah, okay.
Very closely.
Okay. I want to get into this area of housing, big issue in Australia, but New South Wales. Cost of housing, we all know it's an issue. It's been a long-standing issue. Sydney house prices just continue to go up and up and up and up. And I know that you've done a lot of work in this area, but I want to ask a question specifically around our members who are delivering infrastructure services at a local community level. So if we are looking to build more houses, that means that more infrastructure needs to go in to support those houses. And there's probably a bit of a concern there by the cost, the ongoing cost, the asset maintenance, etc. What's your view on all this and how it's going?
Look, very well put, David. And in relation to housing and infrastructure, the only time housing should come before infrastructure is in the dictionary.
Okay.
Normally, we've got to get the infrastructure there. We've got to get the infrastructure, and then we can put the housing around it, because it's too late if we build a whole lot of houses and then suddenly realise we have to retrofit infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we've got to plan it in advance. Having said that, questions are, who pays for the infrastructure and when?
Yeah.
And we've got differences. I mean, the regions we need to continue building in the regions where there is a great capacity and wonderful appetite.
Yeah.
We also need to continue building greenfields around the Sydney area, but we need to increase the amount of infill that we're building. So when we talk about increasing infill, particularly on top of train stations and places like that, we're not saying that should be at the expense of greenfields or others. We're saying it should be in addition.
Yeah, okay. Do you think we're thinking longer term enough when it comes to infrastructure and housing?
Well, when it comes to infrastructure and housing, we do have to look long term. In the long term, we're going to have to address the serious shortages of skilled labour, skill supply, because to a certain extent, in the long term, and even now, there is a competition for skilled people between housing and infrastructure, and we need to take steps to make sure we can meet the demand of housing, infrastructure, and also the green energy sector, which is increasingly requiring skilled workers. Yeah,
okay. You came out and I think you said, and if I've quoted you wrong, please correct me, but there was a comment that you said, look, if we've got to focus on housing and we've got infrastructure going on, an infrastructure build, actually, you know what? We probably need to focus on one or the other, not both at the same time. Where, and some of the counters to that will go, well, actually, we can still do both. We just need to invest in capacity and capability, and that's the cause. That's the real problem. How do you respond to that?
Look, very good point, David, and thanks for raising it. I wasn't saying we should only do one or the other. We should only do housing or only infrastructure. I was saying that what's happening at the moment is some of the big infrastructure projects where each of the states are commissioning a lot of infrastructure at the same time, and even within states they're commissioning a lot. What I'm saying is that by doing that, we are draining skilled resources from the housing sector. Yeah. So on the infrastructure, and I'm talking the large infrastructure projects, we need to prioritise and maybe stage them a little bit more. That's in the short and medium term. In the longer term, we've got to get more skilled workers. We've got to look at getting more skilled migrants. We've got to look at those skilled migrants that come in to this country or this state. How can we get their accreditations accepted in New South Wales quicker? We've got to look at getting more people into the engineering and into the construction sector. We've got to talk to the careers advisors who sometimes have a bias to a certain extent. I'm not saying always, but some have a bias to suggesting people go into the tertiary side of the accounting or whatever, which is all. I mean, it's important to be an accountant. I mean,
well, I knew you'd say that.
You've heard of STEM. Well, just as a bit of a joke, I like to call it STEAM. Like science, technology, engineering, accounting, and maths. Right. Anyway,
highlighting the accounting.
No, but clearly there are ways we've got to all work together to get more staff, and also getting more to join the industry at the start of their careers, and even at the end of the careers. We've got to look at ways where people who are retiring for various reasons, whether it's financial pressures or whatever, or they're moving into different areas, we've got to try to retain them. And even those who are more mature, I had a session of 60 retired builders at the Parliament House, and I was discussing with them, why have you retired? Could you come back and do a little bit of work on that? So we can bring more people in, we can keep people from leaving, and not only bring school leavers into that, but we can get hopefully more people to complete their apprenticeships. We have a lot of people starting. We've got to get more starting, but we've also got to get more finishing.
And I noticed that because in your report, one of the reports that you did, you talked about how people that were retiring, rather than retiring, they can actually go back into TAFEs and universities and teach. So a lot of them want to give back. They might not want to be in the tools anymore, but actually, are we looking at different pathways to get people into the teaching profession to help bring on new people in that particular sector? That was one of the areas you raised.
Look, absolutely. And there is a shortage of people teaching. I'll use the expression vet because it's a bit broader, I suppose, vocational education training. So we've got to encourage more people to get back into the vet side. And also we've got to get more people to join up for the courses. So we need to both increase the supply of teachers and also the demand of the students to do that. And there's various ways we can do that, particularly if we can recognise existing qualifications or existing experience. So we shouldn't be in a situation where we say to everyone, you've all got to do a course for X number of years to be able to teach bricklaying at vet. We should be able to say, well, look at these qualifications. Look how long this person's got experience. Maybe we could tailor the requirements for these people to come in.
Yeah, and I think this is where we certainly share a similar view about building capacity and capability. Our members, local government engineers, they've struggled to recruit people. Long since COVID ever happened, and getting people. And I think there's part of that is actually down to, honestly, the professional bodies and associations to be out there selling exactly the great things that they do, and people should have a career in it. But it is quite a complex thing, isn't it? Because part of it is, for example, Australia have done a study around migrant engineers, bringing migrant engineers into this country, but half of them are still actually aren't in engineering jobs. So there's a disconnect there. It's also, it's the longer term play. You've got to get people interested and excited at a young age, bring them through primary, secondary, tertiary, etc. Then keep them, retain them. You got to pay them well enough. It's quite a complex thing when you think about it, trying to get people into some of the skill shortages areas. And then you overlay that with the cost of housing and the cost of living. People need to earn a good wage. And that goes back to, are we paying these people enough and what they do?
Look, absolutely, David. It is a holistic and a huge problem, and there's a lot of moving parts, etc.
Yeah.
And one of the things we like to look at is case studies of people who have been successful in particular areas. So we all know that people say, I'd like to play cricket for Australia. Look, this person was able to do it by training, etc.
Yeah.
We need more examples where people have left school and then they've joined a trade, or they've become an engineer and they've been successful, right? Maybe they've been so successful they've started their own business, etc.
Yeah.
And that's where full marks to the associations like yourselves, which are out there promoting the profession and encouraging not just the students, not just the teachers, but the parents, to be able to say to them, listen, just because you're not a plumber or an engineer doesn't mean that your children won't excel in it and do well in it.
Now, and staying on the same theme around capacity and capability, because in one of the reports that you talked about, and you've already mentioned this about pathways, opening up pathways, making it easier for people to get into the profession. You've also talked, and this is a big passion of ours because we develop them, micro-credentials, apprenticeships. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that? And what do you mean by micro-credentials, how they work, why you think that's of benefit?
Sure. Micro-credentials are basically one specific area where people can work on. I'll give you a hypothetical example and then hopefully it can apply more generally.
Yeah.
We find that sometimes a person might start their apprenticeship to be a carpenter or something, and they go on the building site and they're an apprentice for 6 months, and then they see their colleagues who are the labourers earning pretty good money and not really having to go to tech to do the study. And so they sort of tend to drop out after a year.
Yeah.
So one form of micro-credential, I'm not suggesting it's the only one, but one form could be to say someone who's done 1 year as an apprentice, they're not a fully qualified carpenter or whatever, but it'd be nice if they could say, I'm a 1 year form fitter or a 1 year something, so that they do have slightly better qualifications than the person who's just the labourer who hasn't got any. Yeah. And that way we're hoping that if a person can do that 1 year, then they might build on it every now and then, because sometimes a person might leave school, and she or he might think, 4 years, I can't do 4 years, and after 2 years gives up. Well, what we want to say is, look, after 2 years, take a break. You've got a semi-qualification, and then maybe finish it off. Yeah. That's one form of micro-credential.
Yeah, okay. We're in a global talent market, right? So everyone wants the best talent. We've just, if you want to develop things, build things, make places great places, you need great people. People are our biggest asset. I think you've said that before.
Yes.
So how do we make New South Wales a magnet for highly skilled people? How do we make New South Wales the place that people want to come and bring highly skilled people here and keep them?
Yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think success stories always help people say, well, this particular person came from overseas and now he's got this particular role, or she's got this particular role. I think, and it is a concern for yourself and myself when we hear stories that people have come from overseas with qualifications and they're not able to use them. Yeah. What we've got to do is there's two sides to that. One is, are people saying, well, I don't recognise that qualification? Well, we have to be able to have a system in place where those overseas qualifications are recognised quicker. Yeah. But also we have to have a situation where the employers are willing to say, yes, I'm treating those qualifications as the same. Yeah. Invariably, once the person starts and they've been there, they're a success. But it's a matter of getting them there in the first place.
Yeah, okay. I want to change tack a little bit, and because it's an area that we've been focused on quite a bit, which is this whole area around environmental sustainability. So, and you've done some pieces of work on this. So, achieving net zero, climate targets to reach net zero by 2050, with interim goals to cut emissions by 50% by 2030 and 70% by 2025. And I guess, our concern is, well, it is a concern, this is going to happen. Infrastructure is a big source of emissions, building infrastructure, the materials that go into concrete, etc., is a big, contributes to emissions. So we need to think differently about how we build infrastructure now and in the future. What's some of your thoughts on, what needs to occur if we're going to meet these targets, and what needs to happen?
Sure, thanks, David. Well, our report at the moment, what the work we've published is more of a desk audit, which says, look, if we keep going the way we are, we're not going to meet the targets. Right? Yeah. Our next stage of work will be then looking at what can be done, and we'll be looking at things like let's take, for example, in the construction industry, the questions we'll ask is the machinery that's being used, is that green friendly, right? And if it's cost prohibitive to do that, let's work out why. And even when I think someone said to me the other day, some of the even the stop go signs, are they recyclable? I mean, I'm being a little bit, but we should look at every item, not just the huge big tractors and that, to see whether they can be more fuel efficient or electric, etc. But even down to the smaller items which are used on a construction site.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure if this will be part of the studies that you do now in the future, but we've often talked about changing climate. Unfortunately, we have floodings happening now, fires. We've got to be building infrastructure that's climate resilient. That we've got to be thinking about this stuff in the future. Does that come under your sort of purview?
Look, I'm not an expert on that area, but we will hopefully be looking at something like that in the future. But it's absolutely crucial that we have the engineers and that they're fully skilled and trained and kept up to date to be able to do this, and particularly to be able to adopt the new technologies. People say to me in other areas, "Oh, look, I qualified as an XYZ years ago, and I've been doing it for 30 years. I'm fine." Yeah. I say to them, "Well, what do you know about carbon fibre? What do you know about?" "Oh, I don't need to know about that." Yeah. We do need to continually keep up to date, particularly as the world's changing so quickly, and the requirements on not just on the climate change, but the AI, all those issues. We really do need to keep our best and brightest at the forefront.
It's like you've preempted my next question, because that's exactly what I wanted to go into, was innovation and this whole piece around technology. I actually went to a conference, Digital World Built Summit, something like that. A very good conference, but it was talking about adoption of new technologies, AI, digital twins, although that's quite an old thing, but into the construction sector. And he was, and the gentleman that was came over from the US, and he sort of put a list of all the professions up. And the construction sector was right at the bottom in terms of adoption of new technologies. Is it a question of new technology and adoption to increase efficiency, or are we still sort of so tied down with some of the regulation and the regulatory environment to actually get things done, or is it a bit of both?
Look, I can't comment specifically about the construction industry.
Yeah.
I haven't done enough research to give an informed answer. But from a general point of view, it is both. It is both that there are regulations and that maybe we should look at and say, well, can they be streamlined, etc.
Yeah.
But not all regulation is bad. I mean, the regulation of foodstuffs and health, and the regulations of traffic, all those are the regulation of qualified people to do an operation on your heart. All of those regulations are essential.
Yeah.
What we've got to do is look closely at those, and particularly new regulations coming in, to make sure that they're fit for purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we get this. I'm not necessarily asking you to comment, Billy, you might, but we do get this from members who sort of say we're trying to innovate in particular the types of materials that we use in infrastructure, but the procurement process is so difficult. It's so hard sometimes for us to be able to do that, which makes it very tricky to sort of try and get new innovation particularly into infrastructure build.
Yes, look, I'm not across the issues in relation to procurement. I know that you've got to, in certain organisations, if you're procuring, you've got to make sure you go through certain governance arrangements, 3 quotes or 4 quotes or whatever. And I know sometimes if people put out specifications for a particular product, sometimes the specifications are for a task, not for a solution. So people might put out a tender and say, we would like someone to build a tolling station with this numbers of bricks and this colour brick and whatever, whereas someone might come along and say, well, you don't even need a tolling station there, it should be electronic. Yeah. So I think there is a bit of an issue there where we've got to relook at the procurement we're asking for to see whether we're just saying you got to build what we've already had, or whether we're giving the people who are putting tenders in a bit of an opportunity to innovate. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you did a really interesting report looking at new modes of transport, and I would encourage any of our listeners, if you go onto the New South Wales Productivity Commission website, it's really good. And even if you don't want to download and read all the reports, Peter's on videos of talking about the various things, and it's really good, and it's very, very easy to grasp some of the key concepts. So a bit of a plug there, but excellent. But in terms of new modes of transport, you did a bit of a study, a bit of a look around e-bikes, and I'm keen to hear a bit more about what you found. But also, the bigger picture here is, there's going to be new types of mobility. People are going to move around in different ways in the future than they do now, which comes back to this whole way of long-term thinking around the infrastructure we're building now, because we're building this infrastructure now, but that might not be okay in 10, 15 years because we're all running around on e-bikes, for example. I'm being a bit facetious, but you know where I'm going here with the sort of long-term thinking. Yes. Would you comment on?
Yes, I'll make a couple of comments on that. E-bikes have got pretty clear regulations as to the size, etc. We're suggesting that in certain situations they should have, particularly for delivery drivers, should be for people delivering packages. Maybe the wattage could be increased for those people. That would mean that instead of packages going in a big truck being delivered, they could go on an e-bike. In relation to e-scooters, where in all states or most states there's fairly clear regulations as to the speed, as to where they can be driven, as to whether you've got to wear a helmet. In New South Wales, basically, it's up until recently, there's a few trials, but in New South Wales, it's basically illegal to drive a e-scooter anywhere except on your own property. Right. Now, because of that regulation, you could walk down the street and you can probably see see e-bikes yourself on public roads, right?
Yeah.
Now, there need to be some sort of a regulation on the e-bikes. If we're just blanketly saying you can't ride them on anything except your own property, A, people will flout the law, but B, we'll miss out on tremendous opportunity, particularly a concept which others have told us about that we think is a good one, called the first and last mile.
Yeah.
So in relation to often in a city like Sydney, etc., people might say, well, look, I live too far from the train station. I'll get in the car and drive to the train station, clogs up the traffic.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get in the car and think, I won't just go to this train station. I'll drive all the way into the city.
Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of cars on the road. And what we're suggesting is maybe e-scooters for some people might be appropriate to go make it a bit easier to drive from home to the station, the first mile, and maybe the last mile as well, coming home. So those e-scooters, we think, might free up a bit of road capacity.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, David. We've got to work out where are they going to be driven on.
Yeah.
Do we need new infrastructure or more infrastructure, or do we need to clarify the regulations around where and how they can be driven?
And you've also got to incentivise people with these things as well, haven't you? I mean, you've got to incentivise them to be able to think differently and to be prepared to do that.
Absolutely. And my view of incentivising people is so they think it's a good idea and it's going to help me, rather than incentivising them necessarily by financial or other means.
This is probably a little bit of an unfair question but we didn't talk about it before, but do you look at, and this goes to the sort of international piece, do you have a look internationally around, Singapore, for example? They're doing some really good stuff to increase productivity, or London, doubt it, but, London, they're doing some really good stuff to increase productivity. Are there learnings that you take and your team sort of work together and look at some of the pieces around the world and go, you know what, we could take that and we could use that and we could probably do something here, and that could be a basis of a report?
Look, absolutely, David. In relation to the housing, we've had experts come over. We've invited them to talk to us at our in our office and to our colleagues about housing from Auckland. The Auckland City Council have undertaken a number of initiatives, and we've asked them to come over here, and we're learning from them. We're learning what's appropriate. Yep. Some of it may not be appropriate in New South Wales, but we're learning from that. We look at Ontario, for example, in Canada, where they had a wonderful program in relation to vaccinations of people between the ages of 6 and 65. Mm-hmm. See, in New South Wales, a lot of people under 6 get vaccinated, and a lot of people over 65 get vaccinated. Yep. But the ones in the middle often don't get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And what happens is those people, when they get sick, etc., they lose days at work. Yeah. And they go to the GP or they go to the emergency department. And so what we're suggesting is, yes, keep the focus on the under 6s and the over 65s, but just like Ontario and other places have done, let's see if we can have a concerted effort for people people who are working. No one wants to get on the bus and sit next to someone with a runny nose, right? So if we can get more people vaccinated, and that's an idea we got from overseas, and we continually, I think, what do we call it? Swipe with pride or something like that.
I didn't think that would come under your remit, but yeah, I guess it does, isn't it? Productivity is getting people into work. It's making sure that people stay at work. Of course it is, yeah. Is there anything else you think would be interesting for the audience to know about the Productivity Commission that you could maybe just leave us on?
Well, it's all on our website, where if anyone can come up with any thoughts they've got, or they're most welcome to send them in to our website. I also would encourage your members to get involved with the Institute because working with colleagues, learning best practice from those in the industry is you'll be much more productive than if you just sit in isolation and work by yourself on things. It's much better to get involved with other people to learn, particularly with all the new information and that coming out. So I'd encourage yourself, David, and the others to get out there and to work closely with your members to do that.
And I know that that's how we've known each other, that you've very much done that within CPA and been very involved, very, very much so with the New South Wales division. So, yes. Peter, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you ever so much for coming in today and having a chat to us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
And that wraps up another episode of Infrastructure Matters. A huge thank you to our guest, Peter Archterstraat, for sharing his expertise and passion on how we can lift productivity and create a stronger, more equitable infrastructure future. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your colleagues and subscribe and leave us a review. Follow us on LinkedIn for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. I'm David Jenkins, signing off. And remember, in the world of infrastructure, every detail matters.